Hello traders, and welcome to this next part of my free course about supply and demand trading. Today we check the different indicator modes of the multi-time frame supply and demand indicator. In the last part I showed you the single time frame mode, and in the part before I showed you how we can manually, without any indicator, trade supply and demand trading. In case you missed these parts, you find them on my YouTube channel as well. Today I show you the two other modes of the multi-time frame supply and demand indicator. We have the manual mode and the automatic mode. Let's go. The multi-time frame supply and demand indicator from Metagrid is attached to our chart, and at the moment we are still in the single time frame mode from our last video part. And as you can see, if I switch the time frame, the scanner shows only the supply and demand levels for the current time frame, in this case for the M30. Or if I switch to the daily time frame, then I get here only the daily supply and demand levels. But now we want to change this, and we want to go to the manual mode of the scanner. To do this, we click with our mouse here on the chart with the right mouse button. We go to Indicators List, and then you find here the Metagrid volume is D. You will here see a different number. It depends on your version, but still this is our indicator. And then we click here on Edit. And now we can see all settings we can change on this indicator. In the first line, you add the license code you got from us, and here you can change the mode of the scanner. At the moment we have the single time frame mode. If we make a double click here on it, we can change it to the manual mode. And if you choose the manual mode, you can make here some more important settings. If you are in the manual mode, you can choose which supply and demand zones you are interested in. So which one of these should be displayed on your chart. For example, here on the 1 minute time frame, we have choose the settings false. This means the scanner will ignore the supply and demand zones which the scanner normally finds on the 1 minute chart. We have also not active the M5 time frame, but the M15 is active. It's true. So the scanner would look for supply and demand zones on the M15 chart. And also we have activated the M30 time frame and the H1, and you can see the H4 is false, daily is false, weekly and monthly is false. And now we check what happens if we click here on OK. And now you can see our scanner looks different to the single time frame mode, because we don't see only now the time frame, the current time frame we're on it. We can see all the other supply and demand zones too, but only the zones we activated in the settings. And now it's very important that you know what color stands for what zone, like I told you in the part before. So a green box, for example, stands for green demand or supply zone. The white boxes stands for the H1 supply and demand zones, and this one here is for the M30. And so you can see on one chart all the supply and demand zones you are interested in. This is very important. For example, if you look here, we have the H1 supply zone. And why is it a supply zone? Because the candle goes down at the beginning of the boxes. So these are supply zones, and the same is for the M30. And we have two different supply zones from two different time frames on almost the same place. And this makes this area stronger than, for example, a zone where we only have a single supply or demand zone. And so you don't have to check and go through all time frames. You simply go to the time frame which you like the most. For example, I love the H1, and on our H1 we can see all the other zones too, from the lower and the higher time frames. but still only the one we activated in the settings. One thing is important to know: if you use the modes where you can see more than one supply and demand zone or for one time frame, so if you use the multi-time frame modes, then it's important to know, for example, if we look here, the M30 supply zone, if you want to see how exactly this zone developed, you can go to the time frame where this supply zone in this case is coming from. So we have here a M30 supply zone, and if you want to know how this zone has been created, you go simply to our M30 time frame, and then you can see, we can exactly see here was a small tiny candle, and then we had this big candle going down, and so this created here this M30 zone. Or if you, for example, go to a higher time frame like the H4, you can see this M30 box looks now a little bit smaller, and it's very important that you remember where these boxes come from. So on this H4 time frame, you can't exactly see how this M30 zone has been created, but you still know it's there. But if you want to see exactly the creation of this zone, maybe because you want to check was it a balance zone before or not, then you go simply to the time frame where this zone is coming from. So we go again back to the M30, and then we can see exactly here the zone. And this is really important to understand, that these zones you can see here are from different time frames, and you can see this the best if we look on the M15 zone here. The green box is the M15 box, and if I switch now to the 1 minute chart, you will see that this M15 box looks really big because we are on this tiny time frame. If we go lower, let's go. This green box is this M15 box, but if we go to such a low time frame, of course we have a bigger box because we zoom in if we go to a lower time frame. This is really important to understand, and you can see if we now go back and check where this green box started, we have to go far back in history because we are on the 1 minute chart. So it's a little bit different to our signal mode, where we had only always the box for the time frame we have opened. And it's of course the same for the let's see, the H1 supply zone, this white box. If I go to the M5, of course this looks different. And we had some customers who did not understand this at the first time, and they sent me a screenshot here of, for example, of such a chart, and told me here is a white box. White stands for H1, but there is no zone at all, because these candles here go up and down, and the candles are in this box, and then there is no strong down move. Yes, because you're on the M5 chart, and this is a H1 zone. If you want to see why this H1 zone has been created, of course you have to go to the time frame, because this here, every candle represents 5 minutes, and this box is a H1 box, so we had a full hour here. So if you want to see exactly how this box has been created, you go to the H1 time frame, and then you can see, of course, this was a strong down move based on the H1 time frame, and you can't see it so good on a M5. Basically, this all of here is this down move on the H1, and this is the reason why we have here a supply zone based on our H1 time frame. This is really important to understand if you work with these multi-time frame modes. Where is the box coming from? If we go back to our settings, and this is what I told you in the second part of my free course, it's very important that you first learn which color stands for which time frame if you use these multi-time frame modes. But it simply takes 1, 2, 3 days, and then you exactly know, yes, green is a M15 box, white is H1, gold or yellow is H4, red is D1, and you can of course change these colors here in the settings, but these are the standard settings which the most supply and demand traders use. And so these colors, if you know, then you know in a second, yes, I know from which time frame these boxes are coming. Here's another excellent example. Here, if you look, you can see that we not only have one demand zone, we have 4 on the same place. Firstly, we have this white demand zone. White stands for H1, so it has been created on the hourly time frame. Then we have this smaller H1 box. It's also created on the H1, a second demand zone. So this one was created in January the 3rd, and this one has been created here on January the 6th. So we have 2 demand zones almost on the same area. And then you can see this green box here maybe. I zoom a little bit in, then you can see it better. Then we have this green box here. It's a M15 demand zone, also on the same place. And we have this purple line here, this purple box here, a demand zone from M30. So we have 4 demand zones on the same area. This makes this area really, really strong here. So if price comes all the way back down here in this area, of course we have to check for a possible buy trade. This is a really strong zone because on 3 different time frames there are demand zones created, and we have also older demand zone on H1, which is 3 days ago has been created. So a really strong demand level, and such levels you should mark, or you place an alert or so on, and you check these places and you look for these places. This is the advantage of the multi-time frame mode of the scanner, that you can find such areas with overlapping demand or supply zones. These are really strong zones. And even if you don't know the first days which color stands for which time frame, it's not so important. More important is that you know here we have a supply zone from 2 different time frames, and this makes this to a strong zone. So if the price comes back here in this zone, we will look for a possible sell trade. Like I showed you different entries in the parts before. I don't show you in this video again how we would enter such a trade. I showed you a lot of examples in the part before. Here's a very good example. You can see here we have also overlapping zones, supply zones here. You can see a green one, a M15, a white one from the H1, a purple one from M30. And as you can see, price came here all the way up and bounced strongly and heavily here on this multi-supply zone. These are the zones where we are looking for, and then price came all the way down, and you can see we have here also a multi-demand zone. We have the white box, it stands for H1, the purple one from M30, and again the price bounced here after it came all the way down. And you can see here we have overlapping zones too, at least 3 zones. I can see the white one, I can see a purple one. I zoom a little bit in. You can see a green one. So we have here also a multi-demand zone, and this is a zone where we check when price comes back if we can find here around a possible buy trade. These are the strong zones, and this is the big advantage of this multi-time frame scanner indicator, that you can easily find these spots. If you want to check all these time frames by yourself, pair by pair, and all the 9 time frames, you sit hours and hours, and the scanner can do this for you in 1 second. I am back here in the settings of this indicator. You should play a little bit around what's the best setting for you if you like the manual mode. And like I said to you in the part before, if you are totally fresh with this indicator, I recommend to use at first the single time frame mode, that you can see how this indicator works, that you can play around with the zones, and then the next step would be to use this multi-time frame mode. And then we have, of course, the automatic mode. In the automatic mode, the same happens. The indicator makes a multi-time frame analyze, but it selects the time frames for you. You don't have to select the time frames manually like here, but the scanner shows you the supply and demand zones which fits best for the time frame you are on. Okay, let's see examples. I'm now in the automatic mode on the Euro USD, and I am on the M15 time frame. And in the automatic mode, the indicator knows you are on the M15, and now it shows you only supply and demand zones which are best to be used on this time frame. In this case, the M15 itself, and here the hourly, but it would not display to you, for example, the daily or the H4 supply and demand zones, because if you're on the M15, the indicator says, okay, I don't want to draw too many boxes, that you are not be confused. I only use the boxes for the next higher time frames. And the opposite is if you maybe go to the daily chart. On the daily chart, it will not display automatically the M15 and lower supply and demand zones, because if you're on the daily chart, they don't make any sense. If you have daily candles, and now you would see here, for example, M5 supply and demand zones, they are useless to you. What do you want with a M5 zone on a daily chart? It makes no sense. On the daily chart, you can see the yellow ones, the H4 zones, and of course the daily zones and the higher ones, so the weekly and monthly, if we had here something on it. And so if you're on the higher time frames, like daily or weekly, then the supply and demand indicator on the automatic mode uses also the higher zones only, and not the lower ones. And so you don't have to select, the scanner does it automatically for you. And this automatic mode helps a lot, that you have not too many boxes on the chart, but of course if you are on a pair like in this case the Euro USD, where a lot of zones have been created the last weeks, of course then you see still some more boxes, but the scanner reacts automatically to it. It always adjusts to the time frame where you are. If I go to the H1, for example, the daily time frames are not seen anymore, but I have now the H4 and the hourly boxes and the M15, but not the daily, weekly or monthly, for example. And if you go to a very low time frame like the M1, then the indicator shows, for example, here the M1 boxes, and it would also show the M5 boxes, as you can see, but not the hourly or H4 and daily, because you are then a scalper. And if you are a scalper on the M1 or M5, you don't need basically the weekly or monthly, for example. Okay, and even if you had here a daily box on the chart on a M1 time frame, remember you zoom in, then it would be a really large box if you had a daily box here. It's not useful. Okay, so the automatic mode is really good if you let the scanner choose which boxes fits the best for the time frame you are on it. And if you want to be set this step by step, like you like it the most, then you use the manual mode. Then you can select which zones you want to see and which not. I am back on the setting. I want to show you one more thing. It's this line, the back loop, where it says 3000. This tells the scanner how much or far back it should go to make the analyze. So if you put here a 3000 in it, which is the default number, then the indicator looks back 3000 candles to find supply and demand boxes. So this means the larger this number, the more older boxes you will see on the indicator. If you want to go more with the fresher ones, you would not, for example, use 1000 here. Then you see more of the fresher zones. But still, the older zones, if they were a long time not retested, they can be very strong sometimes, but not anytime. the reason for this is, if you think on the supply and demand concept, like I explained to you on the first part of this course, let's say we have a zone on the daily chart, a supply zone on the daily chart, which is 3 years ago has been created. So 3 years ago, this supply zone has been created on the daily chart, and 3 years later, the price comes back to this zone. The question is, if there are still enough orders on this place, if many traders see this zone and place their orders, that they really see, oh, 3 years ago there was a supply zone, we have now to put orders on this zone. You don't know it. The fresher ones, the younger ones, these are the zones where maybe a lot of pending orders still exist, because maybe 1 week ago we had a big drop on the chart, and a lot of traders want to jump in such a trade and wait that price comes back, that they get the same price, like I told you on my first part. And if you, it's questionable if you wait 3 years that you get the same price as a person who jumped in 3 years ago in such a trade. So if you think on the supply and demand concept, sometimes these older zones doesn't work so good as the younger ones. But it depends a little bit, of course. If you have a old zone where you find also a trend line, and you find maybe a support or resistance zone 2, so confluence on the market, then maybe these old zones are still strong. In my opinion, the 3000 is the best value you can go with. It shows you the older ones and the fresher ones, and a larger number I would personally not use. If you want to go more with the fresher ones, I would here go with 1000 or even only 500. Okay, but 3000 is the default value here for the back loop. So now you know what these modes are doing. You can now choose between the manual, the automatic, and the single time frame mode. And in the next part, we are looking on the signals which this indicator gives to you. You can see we have an alert for approach, for in zone, fresh zones, and a strong zone. And we have here functions for scanning. And I explain to you what this means in the next part of this course. See you then. Have a nice day and goodbye.